皆様お待た
Thank you very much for waiting. We would now like to start fiscal year 2024 International FPCJ webinar. I'll be serving as the master of ceremony for today's webinar, the president of Foreign Press Center. My name is Kazuo Kodama. On behalf of the organizers, I'd like to make a few opening remarks. First of all, we have audience not just from Japan, but also many joining us from overseas, and I am appreciative of that. Thank you very much for joining us. This will be a webinar using both Japanese and English. So if you'd like to listen to the interpretation either in Japanese or English, please click the interpretation icon and select the language you'd like to listen to, and then please click mute original audio to listen to the interpretation. Please allow me to introduce our center briefly. FPCJ stands for Foreign Press Center Japan. Oftentimes, we're mistaken as a Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, or FCCJ. FCCJ is the journalist club for the foreign correspondents, whereas we are mainly handling sending out information to outside from Japan, and we serve as a bridge between the foreign correspondents and what they would like to cover in Japan. And we were established back in 1976, and we've been working on that mission till today. Now, today's theme is the population decline and immigration policy. How can Japan become a country to be chosen? Japan, ever since the Overseas Travel Ban Order, or the National Isolation Order, was lifted in 1866, for a long time we were a country of sending immigrants to outside. But from 1980s, we have changed to a country of accepting immigrants coming into Japan from outside. Now, with the amendment of the Immigration Act, we have been easing the qualifications for living in Japan and setting up the framework, and also promoting accept the foreign students. So such a proactive policy has been taken. On the other hand, it is often mentioned that the Japanese government is not necessarily implementing immigration policy. What does this mean? In November last year, then Prime Minister Kishida responded as following. As part of the government, on the policy to maintain the country by accepting a certain number of foreigners, including families, against the total population without setting a time period. It is not compatible with the current way of accepting foreigners, where we actively promote accept the foreigners in a specific expertise and technology areas. So in a nutshell, this means that immigrants mean those who already have a permanent residency qualification at the time of entering Japan, and those coming to Japan for the purpose of being employed would not be deemed as immigrants. In other words, as the Japanese population is declining, as a matter of fact, the government is not necessarily publicly announcing the immigration policy, but the decline of the productive labor force shall be offset by accepting more foreign workers. Such a policy is being taken unofficially, but as a matter of fact, the foreign people living in Japan, mainly the foreign workers, continue to be on a rise, and Japanese society cannot be viable without having them with us. On the other hand, those foreign workers and the families who are settling in Japan, how can we integrate them in an inclusive way to the Japanese society? The discussion is not necessarily held, but that is already bringing various strains, as a matter of fact, as a reality. So in such situation, the major media from Europe and US say, how long will Japan continue to be taking this secretive immigration policy? It may not be sound. Now, to work on the immigration issue, to what extent is Japan trying to become a multi-ethnic, multicultural nation? And it's up to the Japanese people to decide on that. But the choice or the selection by default shall not be the way that it will end up as a result, but it should be done in a conscious way. And therefore, in today's webinar, we have invited the expert from Japan as well as the journalists from Vietnam, South Korea, and France, and from their respective position, what should we do to be a country to be chosen? Where should Japan aim for? There will be a discussion. We hope today's webinar will be of help for us, the Japanese, to have a deeper discussion on this theme. Now let me introduce today's panelists. Firstly, Professor Toshihiro Menju, visiting professor, Kansai University of International Studies. A former managing director and chief program officer of Japan Center for International Exchange, Professor Menju worked for a JCIE for a long time, and after that, he became a visiting professor for Kansai University of International Studies, and he's been involved in a variety of projects, including multicultural coexistence, immigration policy, and grassroots international exchange and research. And next panelist from Seoul, we have the honor of having Mr. Jeon Yeon-hyo, Economic Desk Deputy Editor, a former Tokyo Bureau Chief of the Korea Economic Daily. Jeon Yeon-hyo, from 2020 to very recently, was stationed in Tokyo, and he returned to Seoul in March this year. And he is now covering labor shortages and immigration policy in South Korea. Next, from Vietnam, Nguyen Nguyen Cam, Tokyo Bureau Chief, Vietnam News Agency. Nguyen Sam has been the Tokyo Bureau Chief since April 2023, but from 2015 for about 4 years, she also served the same positions. This is her second tenure. And the fourth panelist, from France, we have Régis Arnaud, Tokyo correspondent of Le Figaro. Arnaud-san is editor-in-chief of the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Japan's magazine France Japan Echo, and he also contributes to Tokyo Keizai. He's been living in Japan for more than 30 years. Now, thank you very much for waiting. We'd like to start the first session. The theme is the current state of and issues with immigration in Japan. We'll first have a keynote lecture by Professor Menju for about 15 minutes or so. And then after that, we'll hear from three foreign journalists based on their respective activities. We would like them to raise the issues for Japan's immigration policy, and then we'll have a free discussion. So, Professor Menju, over to you.
Thank you. As it had been introduced, I am from Kansai University of International Studies, Menju. I have worked for more than 20 years on the topic of foreign nationals in Japan at the Japan Center for International Exchange. And today's theme is population decline immigration policy, which is a very important theme for Japan. We are in the era where population declining is accelerated. Based on the assumption of the settlement of foreign nationals in Japan and have them work vibrantly, that is only a given. But when we talk about immigrants within Japan, still the word is being regarded as a taboo and not square dealings have been seen for this issue. We had a lower house election just now. The issue of population decline have been picked up, but nothing much coming from politicians directly over the issue of immigrant or the acceptance of foreigners for that matter. Vis-a-vis the population decline issue, we said that it can be overcome through the women and the elderly people working through utilization of AI and robots. That has been our hitherto thought. However, it is not enough. It's clear the manpower shortage is becoming ever more serious and population decline is ever more accelerated. Therefore, acceptance and the receiving of the foreign nationals into Japan is something we have to deal with squarely, head-on. But we cannot do that because of the immigration and the immigrant dilemma. Therefore, thanks to the Foreign Press Center of Japan, they had organized this session for us. We have a venue to discuss this together with the foreign correspondents. That is very nice, more than before. I'm looking forward to having an in-depth discussion today, evermore. So now let me go on to my presentation right on. Please look at my PowerPoint. Next page, please. My given time is 15 minutes, which is very short, so I would highlight the 5 points over a short period of time. First point, which has become accelerated necessary to have foreign workers working for us. So let's look at the statistics for that. And the second is that foreign national living in Japan is increasing to cover up for the 40% of the manpower here in Japan. So more than the assumption made by the government, more than 20 years, the foreigners and immigrants would come in larger number into Japan. In 2040, it would reach the level of 10 million, much faster than government is thinking. And third, I told you that the government is faced with an immigrant dilemma. There is a dire need to accept foreign nationals and immigrants, yet the Japanese government is not taking any immigration policy. Why is it that still it is looked at as a taboo? And I would like to briefly touch upon the reason for that. Under these circumstances, de facto increase of immigrants is taking place in Japan. Number is increasing. And we hope Japan can be a chosen country by immigrants. So I would like to talk about that as well. So first, let's look at how many foreign nationals are working in the various sectors within Japan. I have a friend who is from Mitsubishi UFJ Consulting, Kato-san, who made a research on the dependency on the foreign nationals in Japan. And this is the results. From 2013 to 2023, in each of the industrial sector, Kato-san had looked at how much increase was there for foreign nationals working in this sector in Japan. You can see agriculture, forestry first. In 2013, it was 1 out of 130 for foreign nationals, but 10 years after, in 2023, 1 out of 36 were foreign nationals. What about fishing down below? It used to be 1 out of 105, but now it's 1 out of 22 are foreign nationals in construction. It used to be 1 out of 319 workers, but now 1 out of 33 workers are foreign nationals. So throughout, across the board for industry sector, number of foreign nationals working is increasing in Japan. Why is it? It's not due to the changes in the government policy, but throughout Japan, there is a sudden decline in the number of youth. So each sector cannot but to rely on the foreign nationals, and that kind of era had already set in. Is a stop right here? No, it would continue to be on this trend going forward as well. Further increase of foreign nationals working here. To what extent it would grow? Let's look at the next chart. So you can see the comparison between Japanese people and foreigners, how much increase is there or how much decline. Please look at the extreme right-hand side, 2022, right-hand side. Right down blue, you can see over the 1 year of 2022, how much decline was there for Japanese people. 800,000 people, Japanese declining. The red one, which is going up, about 300,000 people, which represents the increase of foreign nationals per year during the year. The blue one, you can see the hyperbolic type of a curve. It's smoothly declining on the part of Japanese people, but please look at the red part. Except for this period, there is a declining for Japanese people, but 40% of decline is being covered up by the increasing of the foreign nationals. It's not due to the government policy change, but rather due to the dire need represented by Japan for having to receive more foreign nationals. So what is the most latest number? Foreigners is about 3.59 million as of June this year. So for this period of 1 year, foreigners went up by 370,000. So simply calculated, what would happen in 20 years' time if 300,000 people would increase by a year, multiply by 20, and it's 6 million. Right now it's 3.59 million, so 20 years pass after it will be near to 10 million in total. So government says that by 2070, foreigners account for 10% of total population. But in reality, much quicker than that, I would say that the number of foreign nationals would increase rather big. That is a situation. Let's look at the next page. So in reality, there is an increase of the foreign nationals in Japan. That is a reality. But as I said, there is a immigrant dilemma, immigration dilemma. There is no immigrant policy vis-a-vis increasing foreign nationals. Why is it that that kind of remarks are made by Japanese government? There is a political reason for that, as I see it. Last year, there was a report made on the population and it's decreasing, and I would like to refer to that. Up until 2000, within Japanese government, they thought that recognized that there is going to be a dire decline on Japanese population, so that Japan would need the immigrants. So in 2009, under the democratic government, that could have been a turning point, because during that time, Democratic Party said that permanent residents or non-nationals here in Japan, maybe the voting rights for the local government election should be given. However, LDP, which was the opposition party at that time, had resented that idea very much. Permanent foreign residents, mainly the foreign Koreans living in Japan, and LDP people didn't like that. And also China and ROK, we have a territorial issue in accepting the non-foreign nationals, namely Chinese and Korean people. If they come here to Japan in large number, they would dominate Japan. That was SNS news. So the hate speech have been talked about very much. So within that context, the immigration had become a taboo. And within the Abe government, position was made that no immigration policy will be taken. But this is something odd about it, because you have to think about the relationship with the neighboring countries. We have a deteriorating relations with our neighbors, which is linked to not having an immigration policy in Japan. But immigrants we are talking about are the blue-collar workers. So they are mainly composed of Southeast Asian people, not necessarily Chinese or Korean. So it's kind of twisted in terms of argument, but this is a kind of argument which is also become dominant. What about Europe? What are they doing in terms of the refugee and immigration policy, which have become quite a problem by that time? There is no successful country who has successfully accepted immigrants in Europe. That is a kind of a story which had spread out. Instead, immigration had caused a big problem. Same here in Japan. That's what many people have said in many places. That is why, even if it were for the population decline we need to suffer, it's much safer not to have an immigration policy or not to receive immigrants abroad into Japan. But we have a big difference here between Japan and Europe, because our population decline is going on much faster. 850,000 people per year is being decreased. Japanese nationality. Within a decade, Osaka Prefecture itself will be lost. That kind of scale of population decline which is occurring in Japan. So is it possible for us not to accept any foreign nationals in upholding the society? So this is not based on the settlement. Foreigners will come, but it is based on the assumption that no resettlement will take place. And it does involve risk in itself, in its thought. Let's look at it. Please look at the left-hand side, Japanese language education. Basically, Japan has not been responsible in terms of government for giving Japanese language education to foreigners. So volunteer-based Japanese education has been given, Japanese language that is. So Japanese education has not advanced with a low level of Japanese language. It's very inconvenient living on daily basis, and it's very hard to go out from the blue-collared job. No upward mobility. It's very difficult language. Pronunciation might be not that difficult, but more than 1,000 Japanese characters need to be learned by the grade school students, and it's very hard to learn. Look at the central portion. So when Japanese people are not available for work, company would hire foreigners, and in order for adjustment is needed for the employment number, then the foreigners will be employed. So it's a kind of adjustment to valve function that is sought from foreigners. What about the education for the children of foreigners working here in Japan? But education is not compulsory for foreign children. So by and by it's changing, but it is being very much delayed, so much gap between the Japanese children. Settlement is not assumed. That is why no policy is given, no budget is given to take care of foreigners in Japan. What would happen if it continues? It would invite social division. This is something we are going to touch upon during the second half of our session today. But I would like to talk about what are needed for Japan to become a country to be chosen. In 2018, Japanese government revised a law and looked at the specified skill intended to be accepted, and also implemented a comprehensive response policy for receiving foreign nationals for the harmonious living in Japanese society. And the 200 category have been introduced to go ahead with this policy. Yet no immigration policy is taken still. So there is a big contradiction here. That is why I call this stealth immigration policy, as President Kodama had mentioned to you. There exists a big contradiction here. Second, there is going to be a big change in the demography. So when it comes to receiving of the foreign nationals, of course, so far, we used to say that I think 2 to 3 years ahead, people will be needed in specific sector, and to cover for that, we need to receive a certain number of foreign nationals. But we are becoming prescient, looking ahead, 10 years after, 20 years or beyond. And in what sector, in what way foreign nationals can be accepted? We need to take a longer-term point of view and make a system ready to accept more foreign nationals. That is necessary. Third one, which is the most important one. Entire society and community of Japan has to harmoniously coexist with the foreign nationals. So that kind of era will come. That is the only way to become a sustainable society in Japan. So we need to have a changing of the mindset for people, companies, and the local government. It's no simple matter, but this is a call coming from the era. We need to change ourselves and our mindset. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Menju. Today, he put together all the important discussion points that shall be discussed today. So if I may briefly summarize what was pointed out. Firstly, the economy in Japan, the decline of the Japanese productive labor force is being complemented by the foreign nationals in almost all sectors. That's the reality. So we have to recognize that reality. That's the first point. And secondly, what the government of Japan is maintaining in terms of the policy of accepting the foreign workers, not assuming that they will settle down in Japan. It's a recent past, but the discussion of accepting immigrants, there is a history of seeing that as a taboo vis-a-vis the relationship with the neighboring countries, and also the refugee issues faced by the Western countries, causing some discussions. So there's a taboo in talking about the immigration policy. Therefore, that led to only the education of the Japanese language driven by the volunteers. And the children of the foreign nationals who are living in Japan, because they're not subject to the compulsory education, can we just leave them without taking any measures? So there's very significant points for discuss. So next, I'd like to invite Tuen Nguyen come from Vietnam News Agency. Over to you, Tuen-san.
聞こえますか？
Hear me?
Firstly, I want to say thank FPCJ for giving me this great opportunity to share my views about Japan's immigration issue. I would like to share my slide. Yeah. As a journalist from a country that currently has the largest number of foreign technical intern trainees in Japan, I would like to point out some of the foreign shortcomings in the technical intern trainee system. Yeah, firstly, it's about salary. Yeah, because foreign laborers are working in Japan as technical intern trainees, their salary is lower than normal Japanese laborers who have the same job. The basic salary of technical intern trainees in Japan ranges from 120,000 to 150,000 yen monthly. An article published in Nikkei Asia in October 2023 also wrote that technical intern trainees received an average monthly salary of 177,800 in 2022 compared to 248,400 in for foreign. I also would like to mention the decreasing in value, which is making the income of Vietnamese technical intern trainee even lower when sending money home. This is one of the important factors that reduce Japan's attractiveness as a labor destination compared to other markets, such as South Korea or Taiwan. According to the exchange rate at the end of 2016, the salary is equivalent to 25 million to 32 million Vietnamese dong monthly. If calculated according to this year exchange rate of 170 Vietnamese dong to 1 yen, income of Vietnamese technical intern trainee converted to Vietnamese currency is only from 22 million to 25 million Vietnamese dong monthly. Secondly, I would like to talk about no changing job allowed. It's a risk of human rights violation, violence against foreign technical intern trainees. These are the photos taken from a video of a Vietnamese technical intern trainee being abused has gone viral on the internet. It shocked many people about the reality of labor in Japan. The 41-year-old man endured 2 years of beating and bullying by his Japanese worker at a construction company based in Okayama. Technical intern trainees went missing to fight paid employment illegally or stay in job where they face mistreatment such as unpaid rates or being abused. Yeah, thirdly, I want about management fee. Thirdly, the management fee is paid for by the technical intern trainees. In my opinion, receiving enterprises should share them with technical intern trainees. The right side of my slide is the comparison of the fee that the technical intern trainee have to pay depending on the country. Finally, I want to talk about the integration into Japanese society. The workers working in Japan under the technical intern trainee program are all young adults. Besides work, they have the need for entertainment because life with only work is extremely stressful. However, they have the following limitation. Insufficient Japanese language ability results in reluctance to communicate with Japanese people. Insufficient knowledge of Japanese culture and law result in accidental wrongdoing. Here is the photo that shows the cultural difference between Vietnam and Japan. Yes. Seeing the ripe orange hanging on the branch, but no one was picking them. The fruits was falling all over the ground. A Vietnamese technical intern trainee named Q asked the Japanese homeowner for 2 orange. The homeowner happily gave them to him. But the next day, he saw the orange had been cut down. Vietnamese people, it could be very shocking because they do not understand what they did wrong. Field workers, such as specified worker and engineer, are required to improve their Japanese language skill and knowledge of Japanese culture and law. However, technical intern training allows skilled workers, so they need guidance from businesses or communities, especially after coming to Japan. Direct guidance at the site should be able to help them improve their skills faster. I would like to conclude my presentation here. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much. So she mentioned firstly the needs to improve the salary level for the technical interns, and with the weakening of yen, with the weak yen compared to a few years ago, the salary that the Vietnamese receive in consent is actually devaluing, and also the needs to protect the human rights of the technical interns. There should be an employment system so that they can be secured to be able to change the job to healthy companies. And the third issue is the management fee issue. Right now, the management issue is to be borne by the technical interns, but there should be the burden should be shared with the receiving companies. And then last but not least, the integration. Those technical interns from Vietnam to support them to be integrated into Japanese society. There needs to be a support for them to be able to improve the Japanese language. So those were the points made. So for these points, we would like to have a further discussion later on. So next, I'd like to invite the journalist from France. Mr. Regis Arnaud. So over to you, Arnaud-san.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be after Mr. Minju and with my colleague to talk about this issue. First, I would start with a personal anecdote. I think Japan has never been positioned to attract migrants. It is a very popular society in the world since from outside. Last week, I interviewed the French founder of an IT service company who just opened an office in Tokyo. And he was telling me that to open an office in Tokyo makes his image so much better that he can hire French people in France more easily, because to have an office in Japan, a kind of a premium to his image as a company. So it gives you an idea of how popular and attractive Japan is. I try to put the Japanese situation in an international perspective, and I will base a lot of what I say from the OECD report about Japan that was published in June. I think if we were to put immigration on a line, you would have on one side what I would call the permanent model, like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the US, and most of Europe, including France. So these countries are countries where basic philosophy, if I can sum up, is that you can become a national if you want to become so. You can become French eventually, English, German, American. You can stay for a while, settled, and eventually become a citizen and have children. This is a model that I would say is aspirational. So I would say they sell to the migrant, they offer to the migrant a future. Whereas the model of Japan, for example, or other models are temporary models. And in this category, on the other side of this line, I would put Japan, but also South Korea, Middle East, and Singapore, for example. And these countries, they don't sell a future, they sell a present. And you are there only for a while, and eventually you have to go. Of course, there are many different variations of this model, but I would say that Japan is still very much a temporary model and not a permanent model. It's a pretty attractive country, relatively speaking. There are about 300,000 students in Japan, and they have quite long while, more than 40% stay more than 5 years. As for high-skilled migrants, they have the same problem as students when they enter Japanese company. Japanese company are not suitable for them usually. As all Japanese know, the training in Japan usually is inside the company. The advancement, the career promotion is through seniority, which means that you have to stay for a long time, of course. And Japanese company reward soft skills much more than other work cultures. So for foreigners, it's quite hard from the beginning to adapt to a Japanese environment. According to the OECD, again, 60% of high-skilled workers stay less than 5 years. As for low-skilled migrants, as my Vietnamese colleagues say, I think they suffer two things: low pay, which is a problem general in Japan. This is why when we enter a ramen restaurant, we pay a very, very slimy amount to the worker. And of course, the second problem, as my colleague again mentioned, is the debilitating effect of the change. When I look at what I get in yen, I lost 40% of my purchasing power when I come back to Europe. So these two things make a country, make Japan a country that people still choose by default and not by real choice. And also, again, as my Vietnamese colleague said, and as my Korean colleague may say, foreign workers enjoy less protection in Japan, even with the new system. They cannot change employer as they wish, and it's a big problem. If I can conclude, I would say Japan still has a very strong attractiveness. I just came back from Bangladesh. There are only 24,000 Bangladeshi workers in Japan, and there is 180 million Bangladeshi people. I don't know why there are so few Bangladeshi workers, but when you look at the number of Nepalese, for example, about 140,000, I think, you see the huge potential of, for example, Bangladesh as a pool of workers. Eventually, I would say that the Japanese system, the temporary model, and also this term that I don't like, I have to say, of coexistence, which in Japanese is kyosei, and which is used really a lot, is not a good term to frame the discussion, because kyosei means that foreigners in Japanese are bound to be always different, like black and white during apartheid South Africa. And I think it's a term that should get out of the public domain. But we will talk about that on the second part of the discussion, I think. Thank you.
アロノさん、ありがとうございました。やはり
Thank you very much, Mr. Arnold. So your perspective is very much interesting. So I'd like to move ahead, but just one or a few points to make. So the position from the international comparison perspective on immigration, so-called permanent model, from our perspective, to provide the permanent residency, the policy based on the assumption to provide the permanent residency in some countries, but as you pointed out, Japan is taking a temporary model, not assuming them to stay for a long time. So that's a difference. And that was very much pointed out. And what Wen-san from Vietnam pointed out, when it comes to employment, even under the new employment and training system in Japan, the issues of the conversion of foreign technical intern systems will not be solved by introducing this new training and employment system. And the last point about the coexistence, the concept of kyosei, this is very interesting. So that's something we'd like to take up more in the second session. Mr. Arnold said that the concept of kyosei is it's just drawing a line between we, Japanese, against they, foreigners. This may continue dichotomy, so that's something we'd like to have a further discussion. Thank you very much. Now, thank you very much for waiting from Seoul. John Young-san, over to you.
Hello, nice to see you. I am from Korea. I am Yong-fo Chan, Korea Economic Daily. So I'm a reporter in charge of immigration policy in Korea. As viewed from a Korean perspective, I would like to share with you the impression about Japan's situation. On the 14th of this month, Japan declared they are in competition with South Korea over foreign workers. At the diet on this day, reforms to the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act were passed. And to Korea and to Taiwan and elsewhere, these kind of thoughts have been declared on immigration from Japan. This revision eliminated the previous technical intern training program made to bring in foreign workers and replaced it with a new training and employment program. So clearly, this stance has been shown by Japanese government according to the perspective of South Korea that we are now in competition for the foreign workers. And of course, Korea is also increasing its immigrants' acceptance. Addition by 80,000 people for low-skilled foreign workers. The total fertility rate is now less than 1 digit. So in near future, Taiwan would also come into the competition for foreign workers, because in 2022, China's birth rate declined to 1.09, and following on Japan and Taiwan, if China comes in, then there is going to be a very severe competition among the Asian countries for getting hold of the foreign workers needed. So neighboring countries, one after another, are sort of coming into this competition fiercely. That is because Korea is sort of preempting the foreign workers' laborers market. In 2022, it was a low-skilled foreign workers working to the tune of 56,000 under E9 visa, but this year it was tripled in terms of its ceiling, up to 165,000. There is no limit to this staying period. And skilled foreign workers, some of them under E74 visa, can bring along their family members as well. And the limit for the E74 visa was increased to 35,000 this year from 600 from 2018, increased by more than or near to 60 times. Korea's wage level is by far more than Japan's or Taiwan's level, so it's an upset element for neighboring countries. Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting also had mentioned that wages given to the low-skilled foreign workers working in Korea in 2022 was about 271,000 yen, an equivalent. But counterpart in Japan, average wage was 212,000 yen. Mid-level skilled foreign workers, the category 1 specific skill, their wages were 246,000 yen. So in Korea, foreign workers coming from Southeast Asia is offering higher wages than that given in Japan or in Taiwan. We have a law in Korea that minimum wages should be equivalent for the Korean workers as well as foreign workers. So sometimes foreign workers earn more than the Korean counterpart in Korea. That's the news we often hear. At the end of 2022, foreign workers working in Japan amounted to 1.823 million. Korea and Taiwan, respectively, the number was 843,000 and 7.7 million. So all these three countries over the decade, foreign national number went up by 2 or 3 times fold. But still, the manpower shortage is very serious due to the lowering of the fertility and decline in population. So three countries all vie for the acceptance of foreign workers. By 2040, JICA says that in order to maintain their current economic activity, Japan will be in need of 6.75 million foreign workers, which means that additional 5 million is needed. In case of Korea, by 2035, 370,000 more of foreign nationals will be needed because of manpower shortage, and Taiwan's number will be the 400,000 need for the foreign workers. And of course, people are looking for higher wages, according to Asian Development Bank Research Institute. Are you hearing me? Foreign workers coming from emerging 10 countries in Asia amounts to 4.64 million in total. The largest sending country of foreign laborers is Bangladesh, which amounts to about 1.14 million, and many of them choose Middle Eastern countries to work. So remaining 3.5 million are the population that Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and China, who is going to enter into this race, were competing for securing into their own country. As Professor Minju had mentioned, East Asia countries have their own unique community, society, and cultural foundation, very negative on accepting immigrants. In case of Korea and Japan, overall, people say 60 to 70% say that they are opposed to having an active immigration policy. That is why Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are choosing the minimum necessary number of foreign workers and have them settle, which is a sort of a negative type of immigrant policy, as Professor Minju had mentioned, based on the training and employment system for 3-year period. For the specific steel, number 1, 5 years, construction and shipbuilding. If a skilled professional skill is gained in 11 different areas, then those kind of foreign workers will be given the number 2 category, specific skill qualification. And this number 2 qualification would allow that foreign worker to bring in their family members as well as apply for permanent residence. They will be looked at as a de facto immigrants. But those people who have been given the number 2 qualification only amounted to 20. But Japan has a policy to significantly raise this limit. And also in case of Korea this year, limit for E7 for visa have been increased by about 60 times fold, which is a skilled foreign worker. Korea's foreign worker system is based on the ILO rules. So ILO highly values the immigrant control system of Korea as being progressive and highly advanced. And government manages the whole process of selection up to the assistance to the stayers of foreign workers as well as up to the return to their own country. On the other hand, in Japan, private sector broker companies are involved and they are becoming a mediator and they charge an enormous fee for that. There is a dire need for increasing the foreign nationals, so government has to have a good policy made on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we heard from 3 journalists. First, Tuen-san talked about the issue of the current foreign technical intern training system, what the Vietnamese trainees are facing, and Arnold-san raised the points about Japanese system not assuming the permanent residency, the needs to relax that, and Jong Yeon-san talked about this foreign technical intern system. Well, according to Arnold-san, that's a temporary model, but there may be some trend towards permanent. But between Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and China, there is a competition for the foreign workers that has already started, and that itself needs to be looked into for Japan to take measures going forward. Now, before going to the specific discussion points, for those points that were raised, we'd like to go deeper. If I may sort the issues out a little bit, of course, we were aware that this current technical intern training system has its issues, but to be fair, according to some data, for the past 30 years, we have received more than 2 million young trainees from Asian countries. And working ethics, the Japanese language, and the skills and the expertise that they learned, they go back to start up a new, to have startups and to contribute to their own countries. We have to also recognize that. But it's about one local government. And for the reference for the audience, for instance, in Gunma Prefecture, a city of Oizumi, the town of Oizumi, right now, the foreign national account for more than 20% of their total population, which is quite big in this one town. And more than 70% of the foreign nationals are the permanent residents. And in terms of their children, enrollment in, or more than 40% of the students in elementary schools are foreign nationals in some of the schools in this town. So the compulsory education is, of course, provided to those non-Japanese children. So the foreign workers are settling down in those local governments where there's a concentration of the foreign workers. They are working on various issues, and efforts are being taken, which we need to also recognize as well. Having said that, as was pointed out now, there are several problems such as the technical intern training system as well as the specified skills system to replace them, or excuse me, the system itself as a pillar. The new training and employment system, in principle, the design of the system is that the workers will not be able to bring their families with them. That still remains an issue that they cannot bring their families with them. On the other hand, as Johnson pointed out, for a specified skill too, then it's possible to bring the families and apply for the permanent residency. But before that, it's not possible. So, Professor Minju, of course, there are several issues, but listening to three journalists, is there any reaction from your side, please?
はい。やはり
Yes, thank you. We heard from our foreign correspondents directly. It was very good for me to listen to them. Thank you. Because so far, only Japanese people tended to discuss these things internally. We haven't yet exchanged with foreigners. And with regard to the technical intern training system, of course, part of the NGO people and volunteers have been engaged in discussion, but people tended to take it as someone else's problem. But it was very good to know the views from foreign correspondents, which can be conveyed to Japanese nationals, which was a very good opportunity. So I heard from two journalists representing their international perspective, which was very informative for me. Thank you. And informative also for the Japanese people who are listening in today. Of course, foreigners earn much lower wages. That is a fact. Because in 2023, there is a basic statistics for the wages. And look at the general workers' monthly wage, about 320,000 yen. What about the foreign counterpart workers, 230,000 yen? And also, highly skilled professionals who are mainly graduates of a university, even their wages are about 300,000 yen, lower than Japanese people's average wage in terms of foreign nationals. So in general, there is a tendency for foreign workers to earn lower wages than Japanese people. And what about the dispatched worker, temporary worker? Like Japanese Brazilians mainly fit that category. So because of the manpower shortage, companies hire foreign nationals and they would employ foreign nationals under the temporary sending dispatch system. So they are the first ones to go in type of a recession. So then next comes the non-regular workers from Japan. And until the end, who will remain with the company will be the full-time Japanese workers. So as a part of a safety net, Japan hires foreign workers. It was good when our population was at a certain level and when there was a margin left hiring the foreign nationals. But now significant decline of population is setting in. Elderly people and women are already working in the labor market, so there is no margin left, which means that foreigners have to come in as a mainstream workers and integrate them to our society so that companies can accept more of the foreign workers and have them shine in their workplace in Japan. This is a way to go. Otherwise, our community will not be upheld and continue. And this recognition is something which might be missing still. Ever since 1993, the technical intern training system has been introduced, and now it was switched to training and employment system. System-wise, it's different, but it's just a partial revision of the hitherto technical intern training system. It is not so. This aspect need to be vocally publicized. Otherwise, a 30-year-long mentality will not go. That is to stay. People will not change their mindset. So government has to clearly state their view that their policy had changed. One more point I would like to say is the responses coming from the local government. Last year, Nikkei had conducted a research on the local government bodies with regard to how much they had accepted the foreign workers. The questionnaire survey done to the municipality head, local government head. And many of them said that they are willing to receive foreign workers because it's vital, it's essential. So all the local businesses are being sustainable thanks to the foreign workers. So more than 60% of the people who had responded to the survey said that they are in favor of hiring foreigners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a great opportunity. So with Professor Menju's additional comment, Wen-san, Arnold-san, John-san, anyone that would you like to make additional comment or present some discussion points or make supplementary comments? Anyone?
Hi,
Ken-san, どうぞ。はい。
yeah, yes,
You have the
I want
floor.
to share some view. After listening the speaker from Mr. Minju, Mr. Arnold, and Mr. John Ho, I saw that we have some sharing points. As I agree with the talking point, Mr. Arnold, about the employment for skill development program. I also hope that the shortcoming I mentioned in session 1 in my presentation may be adjusted in the employment for skill development. But the program will be enforced from the 2027. So it will have 2 years more to enforce the program. So I want to give some recommendation. I want to raise some shortcoming about the technical intern trainee program to adjust the right to next year, 2025 and 2026. Before the program, the employment for skill development program being enforced. And about regarding to the talking point of Mr. John Ho about the labor destination in Taiwan and South Korea, I also agree that I have talked about the problem with my Vietnamese friend in sending company in Vietnam, and they also told me that in comparison to Japanese market as a labor destination, South Korea is the most advantage labor destination. Vietnamese worker always choose the South Korean first because the high income in comparison to Japan, and after Taiwan because the pre-departure training is shorter, really shorter to pre-departure training in Japan.
Thank you. ありがとうございました。はい。
Yeah, that's my
Yes.
my view.
いや、追加的なコメント、レコメンデーションありがとう。
Thank you for the additional recommendation and comment. So Arnold-san or Jonyon-san, any additional comment from you?
Hi.
ちょっといいですか? In case of Korea, government has been pursuing the policy About the illegal stayers issue, about 30% of people who are coming from abroad for working in Japan, they are illegal stayers, illegal residents. Sorry, we were not able to hear you. Are you saying that you are talking about the illegal stayers of Japan? In terms of Japan's immigration policy and the policy for receiving the foreign workers? I was wondering what is your case in Japan because that can be a good reference for Korea. Thank you.
先生、何か
So, Professor Menj, anything on the illegal stay?
不法滞在者は
About the maybe in around 100,000 people are illegal overstayers in Japan. It goes up and down, but we have a much harsher control on that. So it has been reduced in terms of number. It's different from illegal stayers. There are people who are applying for the refugee status. So sometimes illegal stayers are there, whose number is increasing gradually. I know that the refugee is a totally different issue, another difficult issue, but separate issue. Japan is an island country. We are distant away from Africa and Middle East, so that people applying for refugee status here is small in number, but gradually, by and by, Japanese government is increasing its receipt for the illegal stayers. If it is intertwined with the refugee issue, it is so complex, so it's very hard for me to answer in general.
もうしてますので
Thank you. As time is pressing, we would like to conclude the first session with this. But if I may, on the issues of the technical intern training system raised by Twain-san, and for the recent example on how they're treated vis-a-vis the Japanese staff from the fairness perspective. On the other hand, of course, there are issues, but there are cases where the technical interns are working in the nursery homes, so including the Japanese language education. Some facilities are focusing a lot to educate the trainees, interns on the Japanese language, and the workers, the foreign workers employed with the comparable treatments and benefits with the Japanese staff. So some efforts are being made to improve the benefits and treatments, but of course overall it's not sufficient. But there are some such cases in the nursing care home for the elderly. So with that, I'd like to move on and start the second session. Now session 2 has set the theme of what should Japan's immigration policy be to become a country to be chosen. With that as a topic, we'd like to have a discussion. So first, we'd like to hear from 3 foreign media journalists. And then based on that, I would like to ask Professor Menju to respond and then have a free discussion as much as time allows. So first, John Yong-hyun-san, if you can start off. John Yong-hyun-san in the first session mentioned that Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan to maintain the economic growth to supplement the decline in the population, accepting the foreign workers is indispensable in those 3 markets. So in that sense, among 3 countries, there is a competition to get the foreign workers. So it might be helping the enemy, but what do you think? For Japan to become a country to be chosen, what should we do? If you can elaborate, over to you.
はい、先ほど申し上げた通り、私、第1セッション
During the first session, I have shared with you all of my views, so I will be very short here because I already said what I wanted. As President Kodama had mentioned, so we can be a sort of competitor for vying for the foreign workers. I'm looking at the living conditions in Japan, and based on that, I would like to share with you my view. As I said to you during the first session, Japanese wage level compared with Korea and Taiwan is low. That is a fact. Of course, to raise wages is the first thing needed for the immigration policy of a country. It's easy to say, but it's hard to implement. It's easier said than done. Not only the wages, but there are other elements needed for country to be chosen. Other attractions and appeals will be needed. Good security condition compared with the West. It's safe to walk during the nighttime, for example. People are kind and gentle. Those can be other extra attractions and appeal for attracting foreign workers. When I listen to the foreign workers, young ones, about 70 to 80% of them said that they like Japanese culture, like anime, films, J-pop. That's why they are here. And they have been attracted to the Japanese appeal. That's why they came to work in Japan and hopefully find a job after the training is over. That's what many of the young ones who are working in Japan will say, who are visiting from abroad. Japanese community, culture, its value and appeal can be exhibited more, then that could attract more foreign people to work in Japan. I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
ございます。
Thank you for helping the enemy. Put aside the wage level to focus on the attractiveness of Japan, like public safety and the national nature of the Japanese people and soft power, the Japanese culture, accepted by the young generation around the world. That's important. Thank you very much. So Arnold-san, over to you, please.
Thank you. So let me just follow up a bit on what I said in the first. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Let me follow up on what I said in the first session. So, if I wanted to sum up what I think, I would say that a temporary model is a temporary solution. So what I mean by that is a model like a French model or American model has many problems and flaws. It's true, but in the long run, it solves more problem than it creates problem. And I think Japan should, as a country that has always been open to foreign ideas or other ideas in general, that had studied them and that rejected immigration in the 80s because of what they saw in Germany and so forth. But now the situation has changed, and Japan should perhaps adapt and think about a permanent model. I want to give you a kind of extreme example. In the US, if you serve in the military for 1 year, you can ask for naturalization. 1 year. Of course, if you ask a normal Japanese person, do you think a foreigner should serve in the army in Japan? He would think that you are crazy. But the Japanese army only could hire 51% of what they need as soldiers this year. So 49% of people are lacking. So what do you want? Do you want an army without people, or do you want an army with foreigners who may eventually one day become Japanese? In the healthcare, already Japan is lacking 250,000 healthcare workers today. So do you want to have a nurse that is from the Philippines, even, or do you want to have a nurse, or do you want to have no nurse at all? I think Japan should think about what it will not have if it does not follow such a permanent policy. I would like to stress, for example, an issue that is really rarely talked about, which is naturalization, which is a KIKA. 2 years ago, the number of naturalization in Japan was 7,059. Last year, it was a bit higher. It was 8,800. But 7,000 people, if I calculate correctly, is 56 times less than Switzerland per capita and 10 times less than France. I think Japan should have a proper way should have a proper path to naturalization and to say officially that you can make a Japanese out of anybody. Actually, when I was preparing this talk, I was thinking, is there any successful first-generation migrant in Japanese society? And except Talento, I can't think of anyone who arrived in Japan and became famous and rich, except Talento. I don't see any businessman who is famous and who is that. So there are not even role model for this. I think more specifically, Japan should protect migrants' rights better. We saw in the Vietnamese example of a Vietnamese trainee who was beaten up. The people who beat him up have not been charged criminally. They don't suffer any criminal consequence for their action. Japan should be much more harsh in punishing people who exploit migrants, I think. In the same vein, I think Japan should allow employer mobility more often. If I'm correct, in Japan now in Korea, sorry, you can change 3 or 4 times your employer under certain conditions. In Japan, to this day, you in principle cannot change, and it's very hard for you to change. Some people say that I mean, it's true that it's a way to keep foreigners in the countryside, for example. If you don't let them in the field, they will leave and go to work in cities. But this is a problem for Japan to solve. If the countryside doesn't have enough workers, they should change their agriculture policy. You cannot slave your way out of the problem. Another thing is Japan, I think in general should go out of this, what I would call the schizophrenic immigration policy. On one hand, you want much more migrants. On the other hand, you make it harder to stay for a long time. As you know, recently it has become possible for Japanese authority to cancel the permanent residency of someone if he does not pay tax. I think it's a very harsh punishment. I think it's unreasonable and unnecessary. There is already many ways to punish someone who does not pay tax. Japanese government knows how to seize your assets if you don't pay. So I think it is unnecessary. And on a special note, I think Japan should allow wives to work more easily than today. Today, a spouse visa does not allow the spouse of a migrant to work, and that's a problem because for many high-skilled workers who have a family, they cannot go to Japan for that very reason. So in general, I would say that Japan should study more the possibility of a permanent model. The idea of making Japan a country of choice based on values rather than based on blood or origin. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnold-san. So as far as I understand, your first point was a very interesting point. It's about the policy issue. The requirements to get the Japanese national should be more relaxed so that anyone can apply to become a Japanese. And the second point is that the intention of this technical trainee and to solve the gap between the issues and the reality about cases close to the human rights violation, to avoid that, to prevent that, the measures should be taken. And then another very interesting point, as a matter of fact, there was a question raised from the audience about those foreign workers working in the rural areas. To invite the workers to work in the rural areas, not the cities, we have to give a serious thoughts to how to attract the foreign workers to the rural areas. And Arnold-san's comment is that not to be able to change the job for 3 years, rather than limiting that mobility, but rather agriculture, how can that be, for instance, a change structurally? That perspective is required to lead to reactivate the rural development. That's another important discussion point. So if time allows, we'd like to take that again. So thank you. Tuen-san, over to you now.
Thank you. About the talking point of Mr. Arnold and Mr. Chong Ho. I think I will have some answer for the problem. I would like to share my slide again.
Please.
Is it okay?
Yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. In session 1, I pointed out some shortcomings in the technical intern training program. So I would like to follow that topic by recommending some solution for the program. Yeah, firstly, it's always about salary. I think it's to raise the average salary for technical intern training, especially in the context of the current devaluation of the Japanese yen. Secondly, the same to Mr. Arnold about the allow to change job. Allowing technical intern trainee to change job in specific cases if they face mistreatment such as unpaid wages or being abused violently. This could partly address concern among some lawmakers or businesses that such flexibility would lead to technical intern trainee moving to city to find higher paying work. I think that is the responsibility of the company. I have talked to many technical intern trainees, such as the female technical intern trainee in the garment industry in Ishikawa Prefecture, and technical intern trainees in factories in Gunma Prefecture. They all work as small and medium-sized in enterprise in rural areas, quite far from urban areas. These people have no intention of applying for other places because they are satisfied with the income and treatment at their current workplaces. In the photo on my slide are technical intern trainees working at the Asanoya Bakery, who are on the far left, and some second on the left have worked at the bakery in the suburb of Tokyo for 9 years and 7 years respectively. Thirdly, about management fee. The fee must be further reduced so as not to be a burden technical intern training. This requires the receiving side to support the cost for the technical training. If the receiving company support the management fee, they will have to select carefully, choose the right people, and require better training. Accordingly, the quality is more guaranteed. There are fewer incidents and mistakes, I think so. Yeah, fourthly, ensure Chinese right about human rights. Require regular inspection and screening of union and businesses to avoid violation affecting workers' rights. Resolutely eliminate bad unions and violating businesses. Such unions and businesses will affect Japan's reputation and technical intern trainees. I would like to raise some data. Inspection by the Labor Standard Office found that 7,247 out of 9,829 work sites, over 70% with technical intern training breached labor or occupational safety and health standards, which were the highest levels since 2003. Offense include the poor safety instruction or non-payment for overtime work. I think the technical intern trainee program should have a sickness and disability insurance system for technical intern trainees. I think the TITP program, I mean technical intern trainee program, have an occupational accident insurance system for technical intern trainees. Most of the technical intern trainees who go to work in Japan are the economic pillars of their family. So they are the great hope of their families. This means that if the technical intern trainee have an accident or die due to illness or work accident, this means that the family will lose its economic support. Therefore, there should be compensation or support mechanism to show foreign workers economic opportunity when they come to Japan. Foreign technical intern trainees are far from their family and homeland to earn higher incomes. So Japan must give them the opportunity to achieve that. Yeah, finally is about integration into Japanese society. To strengthen Japanese language teaching for trainees even after arriving in Japan. Provide control and legal education regularly for foreign technical intern trainees even after arriving in Japan. The three conditions for trainees to interact with local people. In the technical intern trainee program, there is an activity called pre-departure training. However, as I said in session 1, most of the technical intern trainees are low-skilled workers with limited qualification. So the training in the few months before they go to Japan will only be an initial introduction. Technical intern training need guidance support right in Japan. On-site training with relocation will be more effective than pre-departure training. Regular education of control and legal knowledge for technical intern training will help reduce cases of mistakes due to control and legal differences between the two countries. In addition to the example I gave in session 1, I would like to give a second example about traffic laws. Vietnamese traffic law allows cycling with an additional adult, but in Japan, this action is a violation of traffic laws. Therefore, there should be detailed instruction on this and education for technical intern trainees after they arrive in Japan. If Japan wants the workforce and intelligence from foreign countries, including Vietnamese workers, I hope Japan will make adjustment so that foreign technical intern trainees enjoy fair working conditions. Yeah, I would like to conclude my presentation here. Thank you for listening.
はい、トゥエンさんありがとう。
Thank you, Twain-san. So thank you for pointing out various points. If I may summarize, if I may sort out all the points raised by the three journalists, what Arnold-san mentioned, the temporary policy within the framework of the temporary model, the issues of this technical intern system should be improved. Of course, on this point, the government of Japan, as well as the local government, it's not that they have not done anything to replace the technical intern trainee system to accept the foreign nationals. In other words, to set up this training and employment system to have a consistent system with the technical training intern and the specified skills. So such amendment for the Immigration Control Act passed earlier this year. So Professor Menju, all the points raised by three journalists, any point, once again to the specific discussion points between what we are now, the reality, and how much improvement can we expect in the system on the compensation wage level, the system but not allowing them to change the jobs, the management fee. There are several issues. So from your perspective, if you can react, thank you.
はい。
Yes, with regard to the technical intern return training system, it has been in existence for 30 years. Many problems have been pointed out. And of course, problems per se to the regime have been mentioned. But now, training and employment system will come in order to replace the current TIP. Of course, there are malicious companies and employers, and vis-à-vis those people, the government has always tried to strengthen their control over these entities. But in reality, the government was not able to clean up all these mistreatment situations and system because there are more than 400,000 interns which are involved, about 400,000, and many companies are involved. And the government is strengthening its control, meaning that they ask for more documents. It's really hard to have an on-site inspection completely. No way. And also, in Japan, we have a good system because there's a limit to government. Therefore, the NPO and the NGOs are working on the unpaid wages or the human rights or humanitarian related issues, addressing them. And vis-a-vis Vietnamese skilled intern, for example, the technical intern who are pregnant, making it possible to have that female intern to give a birth in Japan. And also, high school students made this organization first. They are now in college, but there are young ones coming into Japan. The intern who are very young as high school students or higher ages. ARPO is the organization they are in the same cohort, same age group, so they enjoy traveling together, for example. So those are the measures taken by NGOs and NPOs. And government knows what kind of problems are there, trying to solve them, but very difficult. So one way to do it is to have the government to support NGOs and NPOs much more positively. Government alone measures will not do. Thank you. For the training and employment system, from 1 to 2 year period, the jobs can be changed. That is a revised part. But in the employment training system, the support for Japanese language education or upgrading the labor skill, it's a kind of a service that companies are asked to provide. But 1 year after, people will be able to change the job, which means that how much serious effort the companies can give, knowing that there is a possibility that those interns will leave in 1 year's time to change the job. But we do have a national certification system for Japanese language teachers and so forth. But using the taxpayers' money, government does not have any system to provide for the assistance to the teachers who will teach for Japanese language to the foreign workers. We don't have a tax money-based system like that because still it's centered around volunteers. So with regard to specific skills, together with a company, government can also come in to provide jointly the Japanese language education and training. That can be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we would like to go into the Q&A session, but just before that, on one point, what Arnold-san raised, I would like to make some follow-up. As a matter of fact, as Mr. Arnold should be aware, in Japan, and Professor Menjo also pointed out, to take immigration issue as a taboo, it's been the case that Japan did not necessarily face this squarely, and this is a quote from some paper, but the population is going down, and with the aging, it's not as simple as to just simply accept the foreign nationals, but accepting foreign nationals, considering the culture of friction, it may not be easy to accept foreign nationals. Quite many people think that way. Now, Mr. Arnold raised a very interesting point about this concept of kyosei, coexistence, or living together, or symbiotic relationship, the kyosei, to coexist. That means that the assumption is that there is a wall that cannot be overcome, that it's always Japanese against non-Japanese. Then if we always take that assumption, then we won't be able to overcome this kyosei concept. So maybe assimilation may be a better expression, to integrate and assimilate. That is understandable. So on that point, on the Japan side, because of the culture of friction, we have to be rather cautious and careful, according to some people. Mr. Arnold, how would you react to that? Or how would you suggest to that kind of idea, your honest idea?
No, I agree that it's not easy. But what's the alternative? Is it easier to have an army without soldiers? Is it easier to have hospital without nurses, to have without doctors? If you keep on living like that, you can have a safe society, a kind of very big Singapore, for example, with two people who really contact each other, I mean, like a maid in a house. It's what you can call coexistence, but is it what Japan wants to become? I'm not sure it's in the long run. I think I think long-term immigration solves more problem than it creates problem. Look at the US. I mean, United States has many problems, many flaws, and many people don't want to live in a society that looks like the US. But I remember once an interview by Lee Kuan Yew, actually. And Lee Kuan Yew explained that the United States will always be stronger than China because the United States have the ability to welcome 8 billion people. China is 1 billion and is shrinking because nobody essentially wants to be Chinese unless they are forced to be Chinese. So if you change your country into a country that is a country of values and that promises you a future, it's true that it's not easy. No, it's not easy. It's hard. It's very hard. There is hate speech in Europe now. Extremist party now are 40% of the electorate. But again, you have to think of the cost of what you don't do, or the cost of the choice of not having migrants or having them with little rights and no future, no hope. So I know that for Japan it's an extremely hard concept. When I studied this issue, I realized that, for example, until the 80s, nationality was only through the Japanese father. It's an incredible, I mean, seeing from a European perspective, for example, it's an incredible way of considering nationality, right? And so slowly Japan is moving from that very, very, very little by little. But again, if we are in a country, how will be Japan in 20 years, where everybody is older and where the population is not replaced and jobs that have to be fulfilled are not fulfilled? I think it's harder to live in a country with short-term immigration than a country with long-term immigration. So Japan should try to, in my opinion, think about this solution.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for that. As a food for thought, the cost of not doing anything is something that we need to give a serious thought to. That's one thing. And then on the Japanese side, ethno-nationalism is a term that is often used. To be pure Japanese, this idea is still quite persistent in Japan, to be purely Japanese. So including that, we need to give a serious thought. Now, as time is pressing, I'd like to move on to Q&A. And as part of a Q&A, I'd like to ask panelists to respond to have a further discussion. But yes, Professor Menjo.
Thank you. About the remarks made by Mr. Alno. So, culturally speaking, maybe Japan should accept more foreign workers, but there is a several thousand of timelines concerned here. We are island country. And there has been a time incessantly people have come to island country Japan from abroad. So people who came from a continent have been the base for Japanese culture for several thousands of years. And applying innovation on Japanese land, we have come to this. We have come to what we are today. So we are island country, had evolved and nurtured its culture. So it's a modernistic thought that Japanese people are sort of close to the foreign elements because we have always been open to foreign culture coming from continent across the ocean. So we are now going into a new phase. It goes in cycles. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'd like to have a Q&A session. To the Q&A icon, some have already entered the questions. So I'd like to take those questions. But the first question is from Tomoko Ashida about the treatment of the foreign workers in comparison with the Japanese staff at the wage gap. The minimum wage in Japan, there is a legal system on the minimum wage. How come that minimum wage is not applied to the foreign nationals, that they are paid below the minimum wage for the technical interns? Or why do they have to tolerate that? Professor Menji, if you can respond.
Yeah, there is a minimum wage or more is being earned by the interns as well as by foreign workers at large. But it is very close to minimum wage, and it's not so much excessive over the minimum wage.
Thank you. From Bangladesh, next. Johnson mentioned about the Bangladesh as well earlier. So it's a long question, but as time is pressing, in a nutshell, this is from Zoinul Abedin. I believe he's from Bangladesh. Japan is facing more serious labor shortage, whereas the Bangladesh workers in Japan is actually on a rising trend. So for Japan and Bangladesh, how can we leverage this opportunity? Any specific recommendation? So Menji Sensei, please.
Yeah, with regard to the foreign workers, it came mainly from East Asia as well as from China and Korea, and now mainly from Southeast Asia. They are growing very much economically, inclusive of Vietnam. So workers coming from Southeast Asia will be in decline. So South Asia and West Asia will be the next source for Japan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the like. Those will be the likely sending countries. What does it mean? Looking at the culture and the religion, by far we have a big difference in terms of religion and so forth between South Asia and others and Japan. So far we've been familiar with the workers coming from Southeast Asia. Sometimes we also felt some gap. But we do have a similar culture to start with. But we would like to be, and we need to be more ready to accept people from country where there is a much bigger difference in terms of culture. So this is a matter of how we can change our mindset. Here we need the government leadership.
やはり
Thank you. Next question also to Professor Menju from Mamiko Masuda, if I may read out. Including the training and employment, one of the hurdles to expand the acceptance of the foreign workers, there is extremely difficult technical terms for the national exams, for instance, in the area of healthcare care, like a bed sore and dorsal position, those very difficult technical terms, they need to be made into more simple and easy to understand words. Unless such reform is taken, an unimaginable time has to spend on the Japanese education, which puts a lot of burden on the foreign nationals as well. So how can we promote the change on the Japan side, on the Japanese society side?
の人たち
I would say that when foreign workers come into Japan, of course, the Japanese we use is Japanese for Japanese people, but now Japanese have to become a language that the Japanese people as well as foreigners can also use. So as you had rightly pointed out, easy to understand Japanese, plain Japanese is something that the local government is trying to push for. So plain English counterpart is plain Japanese. So far, Japanese language have been offered for the use of Japanese people, inclusive of highly intelligent people. However, now we will have a society with foreigners, so we need to present more plain language.
Thank you. The panelists, if you want to also respond, please raise your hand. So the next question, actually, we would like to take up all the questions that we had received in advance from Vietnam. What's the advantage of coming to work in Japan with the weakening of yen? From Vietnam, with the weakening of yen compared to Taiwan and South Korea, Japan is less attractive. So still, what's the advantage of coming to Japan to work? So Gwen-san, please. Twin-san, please.
はい。
Vietnamese workers still want to work in Japan amidst the yen's continued weakness for the following four reasons. The average salary gap between Vietnam and Japan is still large. The average monthly income of Vietnamese worker in 2023 is 7.1 million Vietnamese dong. Why the average income of Vietnamese technical intern trainee in Japan is currently around 22 to 25 million Vietnamese dong monthly. Of course, the cost of living in Japan is much more expensive than in Vietnam. But with a frugal and reasonable spending habit, they can still send home about from 7 to 10 million Vietnamese dong monthly. Currently, Vietnam is in the golden population period. Yeah, you can see in the slide. The labor force is still large. I would like to introduce the data provided by the General Statistics Office of Vietnam. In 2023, the labor force age 15 and over enriched 52.4 million people, accounting for 52% of the population. In 2023, Vietnam had nearly 1.07 million unemployed people in working age. Therefore, going to Japan to work is the way to solve the employment of Vietnamese people. Yeah, thirdly, I want to say about the learning Japanese technique, technology, and work management methods to return to work in the country is one of our reasons. Because it is undeniable that Japan has achieved their success in this matter. Yeah, working age means mostly young people who are eager to explore and learn about a country and a culture beyond Vietnam. Many forms of Japanese culture such as cosplay, manga, anime, ikebana, yosakoi are very famous and loved by young Vietnamese. Yeah, going to Japan to work is to give young Vietnamese people the opportunity to witness and experience the thing they love in Japan. Yeah, thank you for the question.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you. So the next question related to the Japanese language. Steli Obiajun-san raised a question. My question is on the language barriers. How shall we manage the issue of the language barriers when it comes to working in Japan? Those who cannot speak Japanese, how can they overcome this language barrier? ALT members alone, I'm not sure what ALT stands for. So as ALT members to come to work in Japan, the Japanese language level may be quite low. So for such people to work in Japan, what kind of measures can be taken? So Professor Menju, over to you if you can.
多分ジェットプログラムの
Maybe it has to do with a JET program, a part of a JET program, ALT. In general, I would say that when it comes to Japanese language education, in terms of the immigration policy, big changes are occurring on the part of government for the policy. In 2018, the promotion law for Japanese language education have come about. Those foreigners who would like to learn Japanese language will be the target population where Japanese government will apply their policy and support them. Beginning from April this year, the national certification system for the Japanese language teachers have begun. And the Japanese language schools, so far, mainly they are teaching the foreigners coming into Japan, foreign students coming from abroad. But there are foreigners who are in Japan who could also take some courses from this Japanese language education system, and the accreditation system will begin for the schools, which gives out such a kind of instruction. Within MEXT, there is a division on Japanese language education, which was formed new, about 40 to 50 people. Vis-a-vis the foreigners who are going to settle here, a much more strengthened effort will be given so that better language education will be given to them. So this kind of system is becoming much more solid. What about a highly skilled professional? They are more than willing to learn Japanese language, relatively speaking. What about technical interns and so forth? Are they be willing to pay for themselves to receive a Japanese language program? That is what we have to see, like European countries are doing vis-a-vis the immigrants for the intended settlers. To a certain extent, the local government will assist and support, inclusive of the funding support, so that foreigners will be able to learn the local language, and that is what the Japanese government has to do. We have come to that stage. I'm a member of the Council of MEXT, and it has not begun, but time has come to do something.
どんどんしてきてるんです。
Although the time is pressing, but still we would like to take some more questions. So the next question is from Sasaki Yasufumi-san, also related to the question that we received in advance. We would like to package them together. And this, maybe Arnold-san can respond to this. So for the Japanese society, including the government as well as various institutions and schools and organizations, vis-a-vis the younger generation, on the importance of accepting immigrants. Maybe the society should focus more on teaching a younger generation about the importance of immigrants. What do you think about that? And from a different person, a question that was received in advance. for the foreign nationals, to secure the foreign nationals, just presenting the attractive conditions is not sufficient for the Japanese people to be more acceptable to the non-Japanese, and we have to change the sakoku isolated isolation type of mindset. So Arno-san, if you can briefly respond to that question, please.
Yeah, and also it maybe allow me to answer to the question before about learning Japanese. I mean, so many problems would be solved if Japan had a good English learning curriculum when they are children. Now the level of English of Japanese people is extremely bad. There is a ranking, the English Proficiency Index, where Japan is 87, 1 point above Afghanistan. Singapore is second. South Korea is 49th. If the level of Japanese people was the same of Kodama-san's or Singapore people or Dutch people who still speak Dutch and speak English, suddenly you would be able to talk and to have better understanding with the rest of the world, which would solve so many problems and would enrich, I think, Japanese children. And the fact that the level of English is so bad in Japan, I think, should be a national priority, a national discussion, because it would solve many issues and it would make Japanese people closer to foreigners, I believe. As to stopping sakoku, it's a really hard question. I think the idea that Japan is an island, to me, is not so important. I mean, the United Kingdom is an island, and last year they had 1.3 million migrants. So eventually, the policy is more important than, I think, geography. I think now Japan is in a tough spot on this because the yen is weak. So people have less incentive to go abroad. And after 2 years of COVID, this has been even gone worse. So I don't think you can change people. You can change the DNA of people. So I would say to study and to found much more institution like the one where Professor Menju is working. And I think Japan does not give enough public support, public funding, public investment to people who study this issue, like Mr. Menju. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm really surprised, for example, on demography. When I look at IPSS, for example, how little money IPSS has. And I think, for example, today we rely on studies from Mitsubishi Institute and so forth, but it's such an important topic that it should be much more studies. And Japanese people should have a more maybe relative view of their position in the world. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And I think Japanese people should be perhaps more aware of that to put themselves in a better position among the rest of the world, among other countries.
Thank you. ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. John-san, do you have any comment on this issue, South Korean issue? The English level, I think, is higher compared to the Japanese average English level. So including what was pointed out, any comment from you?
Sorry, we cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself. Sorry. Of course, Korean people are learning the English language. The voice is not coming out clearly for the interpreters. It's being chopped up, broken. There are so many problems out there for the learning of a language. Can you hear me? Sorry, I think yourself is not coming out clearly. Maybe you can highlight your major points once again, please. So maybe similar situation between Japan and Korea. Relatively speaking, maybe Korean people can speak better English to a certain extent. But we have to learn more and become much more fluent for receiving foreign workers.
けれども、
Sorry, this will be the last question. Sorry for not being able to cover all the questions, but question from Umezaki Yusuke-san to Gwen-san specifically. How do you view Japan's new employment and training residential status that Japan has taken as a new system for the qualifications of residency? With this Ixei Shudo residential status, do you think this will solve some of the issues that you mentioned? To what extent do you think this new system will solve the issues, if you can be brief?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Okay, in English, how do you think, sorry, excuse me, how do you view Japan's new 育成就労
in Japanese, okay. In Japanese, okay.
育成
So this new training and employment system, with this new residential status system, to what extent will this system solve the issues that you mentioned?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, speaking of the shortcoming of technical intern trainee program, I think that I noted that my recommendation I propose on also written in employment for skill development program.
Okay. All right. もしあれであれば、メンジ先生、
So, Professor Menju, do you have any additional response?
育成就労
As for the training and employment system, content has not been decided yet. The details have not been worked out. So it's an open question to what extent it can be a solution. But as I said to you, the companies themselves have to change their own mindset first. I think that is the most important point. Those people accepted under a training and employment system, they are to upgrade it to the skilled worker and to settle here in Japan. So I hope skills worthy of that will be nurtured and gained by the trainees.
すいません。
Thank you. I'm sorry for the bad handling of the time management. Already past the 5 o'clock, but with this, we'd like to finish the Q&A session and move on to the closing session. I don't mean to be lengthy, but from the position of the moderator, if I may make some brief comment. In today's webinar, in the first session, we talked about the current status and issues with immigration in Japan. And in the second session, to overcome those issues and to be a country to be chosen, what should we do? There were various recommendations. It was only a short time of 2 hours, but the foreign journalists following this issue, they are indeed experts in this area, and very insightful points were made. And at the same time, we had the honor of having Professor Menju, the best resource person that we can have with his expertise and experiences. A so-called evidence-based analysis and evidence-based policy discussion, although the time was short, was rolled out. There's not much more that I can say. So in conclusion, from the panelists, maybe 1 minute last comment as a wrap-up. Sorry for the shortage of time, but if you can make one last comment for 1 minute from all the speakers, in the order of Tuen-san, Arno-san, and John Yong-ho-san, and then last but not least, Professor Menju, in that order, please, if that's okay. So Tuen-san, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to say that the income gap between Vietnam and country like Japan is still large. Meanwhile, Vietnam is in the golden population period. Countries like Japan and South Korea are experiencing an aging population and our source of worker. Japan needs worker, otherwise the economy will not function. Is it a good thing that our needs met? Our workers have job, earn income, and pull out skill and gain experience. Your Japan has the workforce to run the economy. The Vietnamese government does not consider overseas workers as a loss of labor. We believe that a strong Vietnamese community abroad will support our country. Returning workers will bring back to us the knowledge and skill they have acquired after working abroad. I said Vietnam is currently in the golden population period. However, it is predicted that in 15 years, our country will enter the period of aging population. So I think that Vietnam and Japan should take the advantage while we still have time. That's all. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。Thank you very much. それでは、アルノさん。
Thank you, Arnold-san, please.
I think Japan today is one of the most popular countries in the world. As our Vietnamese colleague said, manga, anime, movies, food. So much of Japan is appealing, which is seen in the crazy number of tourism. Japan is a democracy. Japan is modern. And Japan has so much appeal that it is time, and so many needs, that it is time maybe for Japan to consider another model of immigration. To recall, for example, the Immigration Service Agency, the Imin Gyomucho, for example, which is what it is actually. And they should assume that they are popular and make the best of it, and study what are the best way to limit the problems with immigration and increase the good points of immigration. In Canada, I was checking before coming, 40% of doctors are foreigners. It shows a completely different model from Japan, but a model that has integrated high-skilled workers in very key parts of society. And so I hope Japan can make the best of its amazing qualities. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それじゃあ、
Thank you. So, John Yohan-san, please.
はい、この
Korea is similar to Japan. We are in need of foreign workers. We are similar in that point. Instead of a zero-sum game, we hope that we can create a win-win situation. Because both of us are in shortage of workers, so that can be covered up by accepting foreign workers. And of course, highly skilled workers in certain sector in Japan can come to Korea and vice versa, taking advantage of a mutual strength. And we can cover up each other for the shortage of workers. And that kind of positive cooperation is something we look for, particularly between Japan and Korea going forward.
Thank you. So last but not least, Professor Menju, in conclusion, please.
Thank you. This time around, the decline on population and immigration policy, under which the seminar was held by Foreign Press Center of Japan. It's very hard to hold a seminar like that with this title. So I thank you for organizing this seminar. For the past several decades, this issue have been discussed, but never before we have been able to address this issue squarely. New government will be formed in Japan shortly. And what I look for the most is that maybe the immigration law will not hold. Then let's talk about the symbiotic society building with foreigners, living harmoniously. And maybe the basic law on living harmoniously in a society between Japanese and foreigners can be created. Think together what kind of countries we can build together and what kind of support will be needed for the foreigners. I think that kind of mindset is important.
Thank you. So in concluding today's international webinar, if I may say a words of appreciation, first of all, for 2 hours, I'd like to thank all of the audience to join us for 2 hours online. Thank you for being with us in discussing the immigration issue for Japan. 2 hours is just too short, but yet, as you know, with 3 foreign journalists as panelists and have a discussion with them was very stimulating. And in my own word, for us Japanese to further deepen the discussion on this issue, a so-called food for thought was provided through today's discussion. Professor Menju and Tuen-san, Arnold-san, and John Yonhyo-san, thank you very much to all of you for being with us. And also for today's webinar, Ministry of Foreign Affairs has provided support, and I'm grateful for that as well. And thanks also go to the 2 simultaneous interpreters as well. Last but not least, to the audience, I have one request. After the end of the webinar, there will be a link to the questionnaire on the screen. So if possible, please fill in the questionnaire. Now with this, we would like to conclude today's international webinar. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
お邪魔した。